Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech. So I have a guest here, and I'm gonna say this lady. Yes, it's a lady. It's probably rare. It's very rare. I want more ladies in this podcast, to be quite frank. And I've been saying that. This is not the first time I've said that. I want as much perspectives to be represented. I don't want to serve as a extension wing to Fox News or CNN, the hyper partisan nonsense. Even though I am a politically independent. I don't like the two-party system, but I'm not going to get in that tangent today. I already went through that tangent a couple of times. You already know I'm going to go. It's going to be the same song, same dance. So I won't bore you with that. This guest timing is, I would say, impeccable because I think we at a brink of, I don't want to be dramatic, but a very, very we're going to reach a very, very high level of chaos if we don't get our act together. I'm just going to put it that way. The country's more divided than ever. I'm sure you've heard this a trillion times in mainstream media, even alternative media. You alternative media to all YouTube channels that are not linked to mainstream media or Rumble, Spotify, what have you. So this person here is a godsend because she's gonna give us insight, probably even tips about how we could heal as a nation. And before we could heal as a nation, which is grand and ambitious, we need to heal the smaller level, the root level, the family, right? Because everything starts with the family. Even if you want to go extra micro, a person's individual life. So we're gonna go from practically micro to macro, and sometimes you're gonna have to hop in between. It depends how this conversation flows. I am not authoritarian when it comes to conversation because I believe in free, natural flow conversations are the best. If you want to be authoritarian, or oh no, so I want to talk about Buddhism, all that. No, 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 no. We don't do that here. I let the guests do the intro and then I ask questions and then we could just guide from there. Or, even sometimes guests ask me questions, which I'm fine with that too. Reciprocation is, of course, the best way out of conversate, but some people have forgotten that. Some people equate disagreement to hate. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a bit of a problem, even among family, just because they judge them by how they live or what beliefs they have or what political orientation they are. It creates conflict because let's just face it, when stakes are high, most humans suck when it comes to solving conflict. I have contributed to some of that because we rather just defend our pride, what is right to me. We try to shove that to other people or vice versa. We like to get the win, the other side is evil, and that generally creates divide, conflict, strife, and then that eventually breeds into, I'm sure you know this already, from smaller level domestic abuse, mass shootings, people losing it because they take drugs to cope, what have you, and then from a grand scale, conflict. Well, we still have the Ukraine conflict, which is very sad it has dragged this long. The Israeli Hamas conflict, and not a new potential one, and this is potential. I'm going to say that again: China and Taiwan. Okay, because they're paying close attention to that election. If it goes in a certain direction, it's going to influence China's moves great. But enough of me yammering. I'm going to let Phyllis E. Leavitt. They pronounce your name wrong. Leavitt.
It's Levitt. It's Levitt, but that's fine.
Okay. Levitt. I gotta get that right. I gotta be harsh with me now. Phyllis E. Levitt is gonna give the rest of the introduction of herself, and then we just take it from there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate being on your show. I love the title of your show. Um, and I'll just start by saying I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years, and I've worked with a lot of family dysfunction and, individual pain and also with some of the most important elements for healing families and individuals. And what I've learned is that everything we know about individuals and families applies to larger groups as well. Businesses, other institutions like of worship or communities, and to our national I call it the family of America. So I wrote a book that is soon to be on the market called America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. And the purpose of my book is to bring everything that I've learned, and I'm certainly not alone in this because there are many, many, many psychotherapists and people in my field who have learned some of the same things. But my purpose is to bring what I've learned into national conversation. And one of the reasons why I think that it's so important to do that is Um, our mental health, in some ways, is left out of national policy and practice. Not in some ways, probably in all ways, or most ways that are really important to our survival. And one of the ways that we can look at that is that, if your car engine blows up, immediately you're going to seek out the best mechanic to either fix your engine or replace it. If your heart has problems, you're going to go to the best doctor to have heart surgery or a valve replaced or, some other treatment so that you stay alive. But when a person explodes, we don't have the same attitude. We criticize them, we jail them, we ostracize them, rather than looking deeply, deeply, deeply into the root causes of why some of our behaviors are so dysfunctional and so destructive to one another and often to ourselves. And so for me, psychology is the missing piece from national conversation. I never imagined when I first became a psychotherapist that I would be entering some kind of political conversation. But what I've learned, and I was sharing this with you earlier, is that everything really is political. Our beliefs become part of our politics, our behaviors become part of our politics, our values, our role models, they all become part of our politics. And I love what you said about earlier about sort of the microcosm and the macrocosm, because the purpose of my book is to look at how they interconnect, how the microcosm of the individual family and what makes a healthy family and what makes a dysfunctional or an abusive family, how that relates to what's going on in our national family and how they interact with each other. So if you take an individual and you put them in a highly dysfunctional, abusive family, they're going to be affected by it, even if they were born, which we all are, an innocent, wonderful human being. We're all born innocent, wonderful human beings. And then our conditioning determines a lot about how we cope with life and how we see ourselves and how we relate to other people. So if you put a person in a highly dysfunctional family, they're going to be symptomatic. If you put a family in a highly dysfunctional community or country, they're also going to suffer and probably become symptomatic unless they have other supports to stay healthy. And so the purpose of my book is to really look at how we could heal the dysfunction in our national family by taking the role model of what we know helps in an individual family. So that's the whole purpose of my book. It's sort of a diagnosis of what's going on in America and what we could offer from the field of psychology. And I'll throw this last thing in, and then I'd love to hear your responses. Um, the beauty of psychology, and one of the reasons why it's probably not taking more of a center stage in national conversation, is because psychology and good family therapy or good therapy of any kind is intrinsically nonpartisan. It's not about who wins and who loses. It's about healing relationship. It's about healing ourselves, and it's about healing our relationships with other people. Because what I have found as a psychotherapist of many, many years, and I've done years of therapy myself, is that what we all really want at heart is love and belonging and safety with other people, cooperation and nonviolence. That's what we really want in our own lives. And part of the mental illness that we suffer from, or mental unwellness, is that we condone acts of violence and discrimination and exploitation and withholding from other people that we would never want to be done to ourselves. And that disconnect is a sign that we need help on an emotional, mental level as individuals and a nation. So I like to bring this nonpartisan point of view into the equation, and that's really why I wrote the book.
Oh man, yep, this is going to be a great conversation. Democrats, Republicans, centrists, independents, whatever other political party you're in, listen up. Don't turn everything into, well, you can't say politics, but don't turn everything into a hyper partisan battle, because not everything needs to be a hyper partisan battle. There are common ground, and I have to bring the example that common ground did happen But this is something sadly insignificant. I wish this could be done more often. Oh, about milk. Allowing public school choice to have more milk options. That was passed very easily. Three-fourths of the House Representatives just passed it, went through the Senate. It passed through pretty quickly. But when it comes to other issues, oh no, you are xenophobe because you don't want immigrants to come. As a no, no, well, you are a criminal loving Democrat because you want all the crooks, all that, so you could just get more legal votes and all that. That's one example. I'm sure you've heard many. I'm using more the immigrant one because that is going to be one of the big issues, and the other one is about the economy. As of now, those are the two biggest trends so far. It could change because this year just started in terms of recent polling, and I watch News Nation for most of my coverage. But that's besides the point. But I love what you say that psychology is really nonpartisan. I think you already answered why most people don't want to talk about that. They want to have you want to have allies and enemies, good
Mm-hmm.
versus evil, winner takes all. The other side is the enemy. And I gotta say, mainstream media is at fault there. I don't care where they lean left, right, or even
Mm-hmm.
center to some degree. They all at fault here. So instead of just me diagnosing a problem, which I've diagnosed it many, many times, people go to the echo chambers, and that makes the problem worse. So people want conservative talking points. They won't even go to Fox because they don't consider them conservative. They'll go to somewhere like Newsmax. Newsmax is definitely to the right of Fox. And if they want pretty strong left wing talking points, they'll go to MSNBC for those because that supports their point of view. People go where for that's their sense of finding belonging and safety,
Mm-hmm.
which further ironically creates that divide. Oh, this person agrees with me. Oh, the Republicans are racist. Oh, this network agrees with me. The Democrats are crazy. They got mental illness. Oh yeah, they even demonize that one. They both throw at each other. They say liberalism is a mental disorder. They say conservatism is a delusion. If you want to go back to 1800s, that kind of thing. So that sadly creates a further divide because people want to go to echo chambers. So sad I gotta pull your words and add it to the more cynical context.
Well, I think what we want to understand, and this is why the model of family systems and family therapy is so important to make people aware of, is that in a family, in just one family, if you have two parents that are fighting all the time, the children suffer and they become symptomatic as well as the parents themselves. But we don't do well in an environment that is characterized by deep hostility and verbal or mental or emotional violence, and certainly not physical or sexual violence, which happens in a lot of families in America, all of it. Children suffer, they become symptomatic, and we have to know that those symptoms don't go away without help, without the family getting help, without the hostility being reined in and some resolution or reconnection happening. And the best family therapy is all about that. It's about having people sit down with whole other rules of engagement and learn how to listen to each other without violence, without slander, without threats, without any kind of violence, and really listen deeply, because we actually all really want to be heard. We want to be understood, but we don't necessarily either know how to do it or think it's possible. And we're also living, and I just want to point this out because you kind of said it yourself. We're living in this old paradigm that we're supposed to win the argument. And that's really old paradigm. And I'll tell you why it's a very scary old paradigm. Because on the national and international level, as we see now, if we stay in that paradigm of somebody has to win and somebody has to lose, we use bigger and bigger weapons and we kill more and more innocent people. And we have the capacity to destroy life as we know it with the bombs that we continue to make and the pollution that we continue to perpetrate on the earth. And so the stakes are really high. And what brings people to therapy to try to heal some of their most hurting and painful and conflictual relationships is pain. It's not working. And I think we have to know that it's not working, what we're doing. And a lot of what we're seeing in the media and in, continued hostilities that get advertised all over the news, um, sort of desensitizes us to the threats we're actually facing, because war is not the answer. War is the problem. War in our personal lives is the problem. It's never the answer. When people come for help, we never advocate that they fight harder, that they threaten more. We have them sit down and listen to each other, because there are tools for working things out. And so this is why the whole field of psychology is so important. This is what we should be funding. This is where our resources should go to help families that are in trouble, that are fighting, that are addicted, that are impoverished and have too much stress that they bring home to their spouses and their children. That we educate people, that we provide medical care, that psychotherapy and family help could be free. It could be free if we weren't spending billions on nuclear weapons. Because this is where it begins. Those children from disruptive and hostile families, or broken families, or addicted families, or highly abusive families, go out into the world, and many of them continue what they've learned through no fault of their own. We role model what we see and what we know to a large extent. So I'm going to let you jump back in, and I do want to say something about the criminal justice system, but in terms of what that looks like from a
Oh,
psychological
feel
point of
free.
view.
I'm curious.
Yeah, well, basically, what I want to say is that there are statistics that show that more than half of people, I wish I had the numbers in front of me, I didn't write them down. More than half of the incarcerated people in America have unhealed child abuse. And so we're just then blaming and punishing people who have already suffered with no help. And what they need is help. What they need is an investment in them as innocent people who were hurt, who can be rehabilitated. Now, of course, we don't know how to rehabilitate everybody. There are people that are so dangerous that we just don't know how to help them. But there are thousands of people that we could help, that we could help to return to society in a constructive way. And one of the things that I learned as a psychotherapist early on is that, and I love this way of saying it, because I think so many people who have been hurt and not had any access to healing have internalized such negative messages about who they are. They're not lovable, they're not deserving, they're not worthy, they're never going to amount to anything. They're throwaways, they're powerless, they're whatever. They're at fault for what happened to them is also a big message that people get. And it's not true. We really are all born pure, innocent human beings that need love and belonging to be healthy. And so, what I always say to people, and I'm not the only person who says this, I didn't make this up, but I feel that it's very powerful, is you are not what happened to you. And you are not the worst thing that you ever did. We have all hurt other people. We may not have committed murder or robbed a bank or been a terrorist or anything that extreme, but we've all hurt other people out of our hurt. And are we bad people? No. We have a possibility of learning as we go. And that's what we want to offer people. And there are programs, I don't know if you've ever heard of Father Gregory Boyle. Have you ever heard of him? Oh, he's just this remarkable human being. And he wrote two fabulous books that I have read. One is called Tattoos on the Heart, and the other one is called Barking to the Choir. And he's a priest, and he started a program for inner city gang members in LA. And it's totally based in love and care, and he offers people jobs, and he offers people community, and he offers people help with addiction and their own traumas. And he tells stories of people that he's worked with and help to find meaningful, constructive, law-abiding lives, because he sees them in their essence. when he looks at them, he doesn't see a criminal. He sees a hurting human being who it's possible to bring back into healthy relationship with other human beings. And because he sees people that way, he's able to do that. Is he able to do that with everybody? No, but he's able to do it with thousands of people, and he's world known now for the work that he does, and it's a beautiful model. And he's not alone. There are unsung heroes who go and work in prisons with prisoners and teach them meditation or provide family services, or there's people doing these things all over that aren't in the news. So we know how to do this, but it needs to be part of our national agenda.
No, this needs to be talked about more often. And I love the statements that you just said. We are not the worst thing that happened to us. We're not what happened to us. That needs to be emphasized, repeated, even put to an affirmation, if you will. Just put it spiritual, just intersected with that. I just think it needs to be repeated, so it's so programmed, so it's subconscious, it becomes natural, at least for the start of the healing process. That's phenomenal. And I'm not surprised I was gonna get a good, healthy perspective on the criminal justice system. I had a right winger on who is he fits a lot of the stereotypes, hard on crime, lock them up, supports the death penalty. He fits check mark, check mark, check mark, conservative. And I say, yeah, I will agree with that as one step, but sad I didn't get to go along with that last guess because time was running low. But I was at, well, is there a step two to that? To try to rehabilitate them, because if you keep them in prison, let me just use the financial lens, it drains tax dollars.
Mhm.
Want to rehabilitate, and I do believe in forgiveness. I'm a Christian. They did their dues. Just give them a second chance if they're sincere about it. And I have to emphasize if they're sincere about it. And what does that look like? That could mean the most obvious is they want to do as much good as they can. That's the most obvious example. But some it's going to take time, and let's just face it, there's just some that we just can't get through. Maybe they need a new voice. Maybe they need a new method that we haven't thought of or experiment on yet. Of course, nothing violent. I always say violence should be the absolute last resort. Just to not put the person behind bars, but that's an absolute, absolute, absolute last resort. If we tried
Right,
all humane things, then of course,
right,
as much as I believe in being tough on crime and all that, but I think that should just be a first step, and then try to get them, meditation and put all those as a step two, if you will, or
mhm,
maybe a step three. But it has to be somewhere in the process as we rehabilitate these folks, because keep them locked up, unless they're just so dangerous to the point that it can be rehabilitated. But that's probably very few people.
yeah,
But for the most part, yeah, I will agree. Forgiveness, a second chance, and I respect prisons or even people who provide that, like the Father Gregory that you have mentioned. And he's exemplifying God's work, because God sees us at our essence.
right.
I'm a Christian, so I only can speak through a Christian lens, but God sees it as our essence, not our mess, not our hair, not our eyeballs, not through our obesity or anorexia. He sees our heart, our core
Mm.
of
Right.
who we are. So that's how God sees people. A lot of people don't process that because religious teachings have kind of distorted that. I'm not going to get into that, because it's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Right. Right.
But, but
Well,
yeah, go
well,
ahead.
if I can say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. It's about you. They heard me. They heard me.
What I was going to say is that one of the values of looking at individuals through the family lens of America is it's not just bringing rehabilitation to people in prison, which I think is desperately needed, but it's also changing our environment that they return to. If someone lives in a project and they're a person of color and they can't get a job because people who don't want to hire somebody of color, or they have a minimum wage and they can't support their family even if they're working. We have to change the environment that we provide for people. because the stressors of the environment we live in, the poverty, I was a Vista volunteer in Spanish Harlem in the late 60s. And the conditions that people were living in there were appalling. Rat infested, cockroach infested apartments that were unsafe, that people could break into. There were buildings that had been demolished but never taken away. So there were piles of broken brick and glass that children were playing in, you know. So we have a responsibility as the family of America to improve the conditions that people live in and not expect that if someone lives in a tenement building with rats and no access to any kind of services or good jobs, that they're just going to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Yes, some people do, but many people don't. And if we look at the children, what chance do they have? And then we put them in prison. So there's something so backwards about what we're doing. What I like to say is people should be our main investment before everything else. And I'll tell you a quick story just about how we internalize blame and then act it out. I had a client years and years ago who had been brutally abused in his family by, I believe, a stepfather. And he said to me, but I deserved it. I was a bad kid. No, he did not deserve it. He was not a bad kid. He was symptomatic and rebellious because he was being beaten. And we have to know this about so many people who are beaten down in our society, that they're going to become symptomatic. And if I may, I'd like to share something that I talk about a lot in my book, and that is there are many symptoms of abuse. We know, addiction and withdrawal and antisocial behaviors and people pleasing and workaholism and violence. But people fall generally into two categories when they are mistreated by other people and they don't get help. And the two big categories that we see that are very dangerous for individuals and for our country are they either become helpless and passive because they have been so overpowered, they've lost the ability to fight back or stand up for themselves because it was not possible to do that effectively. Or they're so afraid of being that vulnerable that they identify with the aggressor and become like the abuser. And we have more and more people who have become passive and easily manipulated and exploited in our society. And we have more and more people who have identified with the aggressor. And I would say, and they're both victims, they're both victims. It's harder to see that in the person who has identified with the aggressor, but they're both victims of an unhealthy family system, whether it's in their home, their community, or their country. And some of them run for office. And then you have people in power who are playing out their victimization as an abuser. And I think we're seeing this all over the world, not just here, but we are seeing it here. And it's very scary. And this is why I'm so passionate about sharing the intricacies and the depth of our understanding of psychology and mental health with a broad audience.
Listeners, I pray to God that your ear is really, really absorbent like a sponge. Adults, you still got that sponge in there. Your brains can still be sponges if you turn it on. If you turn it on, this is valuable insight, and this is not no gobbledygook mysticism. This is real life. Okay. Now I like how she's going stages by stages, and I absolutely, and now to conversate with her, I absolutely agree. I always said bring more opportunities, bring more opportunities. I've been saying that for decades. I said this is why people fall back. Well, some either go to jail the first time, and for those who already did, they relapse because they go back to that bad environment. So I absolutely agree. If anyone who wants to argue with that, I'm gonna just say it, and I'm gonna use a stigmatizing way. I think you need to get your brain checked out, or you need to go visit those neighborhoods where we're talking about inner city neighborhoods, and at least spend a month over there to see what she's talking about. Because I live in the city, I know exactly what she's talking about, and I have witnessed some of it firsthand about
Mhm.
how the parent was very aggressive. Being the kid is very rebellious, no surprise. Speaks back, fights against everybody, getting into drugs. The only
Right.
grace I have left is I'm keeping them anonymous, obviously. But I've seen multiple examples of what she's talking about. So this is not up for debate unless you want to keep feeding your dysfunction. Just get help. That's all I could say. And normally I'd be more harsh, but she's helping me realizing something when I speak. Sometimes I might ignite a little negative thing, and if I did, put in the comments so I could be alert and aware of that. I need proof.
Hmm.
Because certain times I could be such a smart mouth, even though it's not as bad as arguments and fighting, but eventually you'll breed to that smart mouth comments, smart aleck comments, passive aggressive responses. Yeah, okay. Says okay. Or uh-huh. These responses that it takes a little bit of extra brain powers to pick up. So okay, this person's saying okay with an attitude or some kind of underlying hidden anger and snark and sarcasm. Okay, what's going on there? So this is a family level stuff, but these things do translate to massive problems because it's happening in so many families, just multiply by the millions
Right.
easily. You have a problem, and trust me, I don't have a psychology background. I do have more of a historic background, and I can even say I have some, and I could just use some basic math just to do that. That's how I could reach this conclusion.
And I can tell you that families are really suffering in our country, and I believe all over the world, but I only live in America, so I can only really speak about America. But I've worked with hundreds of people over the years, people who are, going to work, sending their kids to school, law-abiding citizens who are suffering, deep trauma from sexual abuse as children or physical abuse or racial abuse or gender abuse or poverty, or addiction. And
I'm
and
sorry, let me add
people
one more. I'll just say something as simple as verbal abuse.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I had a woman who was adopted, whose adoptive mother would constantly tell her, "Nobody wants you, and we're going to send you back to the orphanage if you don't blah blah blah." Just that message, that one message, rips a person's heart in half. And this woman was an amazing survivor anyway. But was she in desperate pain? Yes, desperate pain. And so, yeah, lots of people come home and they drink or they take their rage out on the people that are there, their family. And they're not necessarily bad people. They're just really, really hurting people. But I wanted to go back to one thing that we were talking about, you and I were both talking about, is that people really want to belong somewhere. The best food for human beings is love and belonging. And there's other things that I would throw into that, but those are some of the fundamentals. We all want to belong. We're not made to be islands. And when people don't belong in their family, when they're abused or they're hurt or they're given those kinds of negative messages, you're no good, you'll never amount to anything, you're fat, you're stupid, you're whatever, which many people get those messages more than we would like to think. Um, they're and there's no place for them to belong, and they want to belong somewhere. If a gang comes along, they're ripe for that. And it's not their fault. I think we have to get out of the fault and blame model and look at what conditions people to try to get their needs met the best they can. And when they can't get them met in a healthy environment, they're going to look to get them met somewhere. And it might be in a very unhealthy environment, and it might be a terrorist cell that they go to. And how can we, as individuals and as a country and as a community, take responsibility for that? Not that we're at fault if someone goes into a terrorist cell, but what could we have done to provide their basic ordinary, essential human needs early on, that wouldn't be something that would call to them.
I gotta say, this is, if you wanna look, don't take my word for it. Take Phyllis's word for it. She has over 3 decades worth of experience here. Okay, she's giving you pearls and gold. Forget gold. Throw platinum in there. Something better. Platinum. Platinum of wisdom. Okay. Really listen here. Me, how I get. I'll normally tell you is listen up. Don't be cynical. Don't be argumentative. Give it a shot at least. Because this is phenomenal stuff. I mean, I went through my fair share of mostly verbal abuse. I mean, the physical abuse didn't went very long, very hard because I was able to fight back physically. So that part went well. But it comes to verbal abuse, which I think could breed mental illness if it persists for a very, very long time. Not just one time. Oh, you're stupid. You're ugly. You're worthless. There you go. That's a big one. Worthless. That just encompasses about almost every single insult you could throw in there. And I was called that several times. And eventually, I like to be resilient and all that, but eventually it wears you down. Your
Absolutely.
resilience could just do so much if you don't have, like a support and belonging and a sense of purpose. People, I could say, not forget their sense of purpose, but it becomes blocked out because they just focus on survival.
Mm-hmm.
They just forget about what I need to do to serve the world. I gotta look out for me because I am in danger. I don't feel safe. I don't have money. I don't have opportunity. And just like you said, people go to gangs and other, criminal or unhealthy groups because they're desperate to find that sense of belonging.
That's right.
It's desperation. It's
Mm-hmm.
desperation. I've personally been there a few times. That's why I could easily visualize and get what you're saying. And this is why I'm in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something to argue about. I don't know, unless one lived in a castle, you have everything right there, you have a perfect life. You could disagree, but I doubt you got that life. Even people in mansions have problems.
Right. Well, this might be a good time if you would like. I would like to say, what are some of the healing principles that psychotherapy and psychology have to offer that we could bring more into our homes, that we could fund for people to learn and implement in their own families, and that we could role model in our highest positions of government, because they're all applicable. And I talk about, what's healing in my book, as well as sort of diagnosing the problem, so that we can understand it better. And some of those principles, most of us don't learn growing up, and there are people today who are learning them, fortunately, and I think they're a little bit more in conversation than they used to be, but they're not widespread, and they're certainly not implemented at some of the highest levels of authority. And so some of those principles are really, really healing communication skills. Fighting is generally, I want you to hear me and agree with me, and I want you to agree that you're wrong. And you want me to do the same thing. So we're just battling it out and trying to better the other person or beat them down into some kind of submission. And sometimes, physically beat them down into submission or with war. Um, so the principles of healing are, number one, that we commit to nonviolence. Nobody can really heal a relationship if they don't feel safe in it, if they feel threatened. So we have to leave our weapons, our verbal weapons, our emotional weapons, and our physical and sexual weapons at the door. That's number one. What if we committed to do that in Congress? No more, angry, volatile rhetoric or slandering people's families or putting them down, but actually leaving all that outside, having trained facilitators that come in and set the stage for safe, respectful communication so that all parties can be heard the way that they want to be heard, all parties, and listen to the way they want to be listened to, and speak the way they want to be spoken to. Number one, what a different country we would have if that was role modeled from the top down. And if we committed to providing those kinds of services to families who are warring with each other or warring with their neighbors, um, or people who are in racial wars or economic wars with each other or gender wars, men and women sitting down and being gently shown that they're equals and that their best hope, and I can't say this loudly enough, for getting what they want, what they really want, which is love and belonging and safety and valuing and access to the, fundamental resources and cooperation and peaceful conflict resolution. Our best access for getting these things is to leave our weapons at the door. So that's number one. And so all of the principles of the best repair of human relationships that we learn in family therapy and in psychology and psychotherapy are all based on me taking responsibility for myself. How can I reflect on my own behavior? Because we can all upgrade the way that we are with other people. We can all be less reactive or take, responsibility for the ways that we've reacted that aren't so nice. If we've spoken sharply or yelled or slammed the door, we can all take responsibility for that, not with shame, like, oh my God, I'm a horrible, bad person because I walked out in the middle of the conversation, but that I can come back to the conversation because I'm willing to tell you I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I don't want you to walk out when I'm talking, so I won't walk out when you're talking, and I apologize. What if we could celebrate taking responsibility rather than castigate and criticize people for the things that they've done? Because we've all done them. On some level, we've all done them. So it's taking personal responsibility. What if our Congress people had discussions where they actually listened to the other point of view and could maybe reflect on, is my point of view actually helping to heal the family of America? Is this in service of my constituents? Does this help people in the inner city as well as people who live in fancy neighborhoods? Am I creating a healthy family in America? And listen to each other's ideas, not just each other's criticisms, but put our heads together, because that's one of the things that we move toward in good psychology and good psychotherapy is, what's the resolution to this argument? What could I commit to? How could I commit to being different? What could I commit to doing differently that would actually solve the problem that we have rather than beat you down or ostracize you or condemn you? Because the goal, and I said this at the beginning and I'll repeat this now, the goal of all the best psychology and psychotherapy is healing the relationship with ourselves and healing the relationship with other people. And I truly believe that this is the access to world peace. And we desperately need world peace. Thousands and thousands of innocent people are being killed before our very eyes. And we all can play a part in ending that. We can vote for people who want to end that. We can talk about what really heals people instead of trying to win some, gender war or economic war or racial war or ideological war.
What a different country that would be. It would be should be debate of ideas, be noble about it. But so personal attacks. What's one particular example I'm going to say? I don't think I've talked about enough. Let's use climate change. The left wants to use the government. Well, I'm happy that the Republicans are a little more acknowledged. They acknowledge the climate change aspect more. No, they say no, no. Let private businesses do it because of ABC. That's the kind of debate we should have, at least ideas, instead of just, oh, you don't care about the environment. You just want the corporations to dump every single thing. And then the right would say, oh, all you want to do is impose your little green tax and suck every single dollar you can with your sham. That's the unproductive version. Gwen's to blaming and attack. It should be no. It should be government because of A, B, C. The other one should be no. Private businesses will be better equipped to deal with it because of A, B, and C. That's more of a healthy debate. There you go. See, I'm a little inspired already to give you a more healthy debate example instead of just personally attack one's flaws or one's thinking or how they talk, how they dress, how they look, what have you, or they just throw one-liners that's good for social media, which I'm shocked I didn't mention that. And then we talk about how social media contributes a lot to mental illness and division because people just go to what they want to hear. Again, same thing like mainstream media, but it's much faster and shorter and more widespread. So I'd say social media on that. Social media can be used for good. I'm not against it. It's just the ways being used right now is horrendous to say the least. But no, it'll be such a. But let me get back to the main topic at hand. So just me bashing social media, like I love to do that, especially with TikTok. But people already had enough free reruns of my comedy bashing social media with that. Yeah, it would be so wonderful just to have debate of ideas. That's a more healthy debate, and that means you gotta start from the very low level, from individual all the way to upper levels. It doesn't have to be Congress either. I'll say that'd be a great example of that. And they, of course, within the executive branch, the Supreme
Right.
Court,
All
state
of it.
governments, local governments. And I also want to include rural areas as well. They're going through their issues as well. Lack of access to people, Wi-Fi, all of that. I've been in rural areas, so I got to see what were their problems. Even though I kind of like the environment more, I could sleep well instead of what you call it, instead of just hearing a bunch of cars and craziness in the city. So that's my personal thing, but
Yeah.
it'd be
And what
great.
I would just add to what you said, which I love, is like if we could debate ideas, but with the idea behind it that we want to come together and solve the problems, not debate each other into the ground and prove other people wrong. Because there are many people that have a great contribution. No one person has the answer to everything. It's putting our heads together, and I felt like COVID was a huge opportunity to do that, that we kind of lost. It was an opportunity for the whole world to come together and just seek solutions and work together to save as many lives as possible. And it became an ideological weapon of mass destruction, and companies competing with each other for the vaccine instead of really putting our heads and our hearts and our science and our wisdom together to solve something that killed so many people. And it didn't have to happen that way. And I hope we can learn from that, that that's what's needed. Just like, and I say this again, like in a family, you would hope that the parents will try to like mitigate some of their disagreements and their hostility or their anger at each other and sit down and find a way to work to solutions for the betterment of their relationship, for the sake of their love, and for the sake of their children.
Yep, no, absolutely. Yep. And that was eventually going to be the next step of what I was going to say. Yep. Come to a middle ground, come with the most comprehensive, wholesome plan, because sadly not every single small business, let's be clear, could afford to implement changes that's better for the environment. And sometimes you need a little government help. Of course, big businesses could implement changes much faster, got the resources, much more resources, staff, multiple locations. So I would say, a bit of a middle ground would be nice. At least provide, government could provide grants for small businesses to do. Okay, if you do that, you get incentives for that. That's how you can incorporate government and business collaboration. That's more of a and also with so many issues like how you tackle let's use mass shootings because a lot of it breeds from what we said. People going through various levels of abuse. Of course, they internalize it. They become that because I've heard those lovely statements you've said. We are not our past. We are not what we happened. You're not the worst thing that's happened. So I'm sure more people heard that. We will definitely prevented more mass shootings instead of turning to a partisan battle. Oh, gun control. Oh no, take it by right, own guns away. 2A, Second Amendment. So that's another thing that we could have I would say solved, but it turns into a hyper partisan battle as always, and the media spreads that like wildfire. But it doesn't matter, it's traditional media or social media. They both are equally guilty. They got their own audience. In social media, generally the younger people, and traditional media is only more, I'm not going to use older, replace it with established people. People's been around longer. There you go, established people. So, or veteran, or veterans of life. There you go. That's another one. So that's nice little, instead of using, or if I'm going to be simple and politically correct, out more the elder population, the experienced population. So those are only audiences that they're impacting, and this is why the division has even gone worse. So don't go mainstream media if you want to heal divide. You don't want to not heal divide. Hear myself. If you want division, go to mainstream media. Easy. Main media. If you want healing, go in a different direction. Listen to Phyllis, for example. That's a starter right there. And that's not her first book, by the way. It's her third book. So she's an author. I think she's more author and psychologist these days, or psychotherapist. Let's do some plugins. I love the plugin part, because this is not her first book. This is gonna be her third book because it's not out yet. We gotta do some waiting, a good amount of waiting. It's gonna be releasing July 9th, if I got that right. I just
July
checking that.
9th. But you can pre-order the book now. It's available on all the major bookstore websites, and it will, as you said, be there in July of 2024 this year. Please visit my website, which is my name, www.phyllisleavitt.com. Sign in. I'm going to be offering a free kind of mini course in how to repair a relationship soon. It's not up yet on my website, but it will be soon. But sign in for my newsletter, and then eventually you'll get this free mini course in how to repair relationship, because these are some of the basics that I really want to share with people. Some of them I talked about a little bit here on your show, and in this course I will go into it in more detail. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I write articles, I post, and all things that are in service of bringing us together, healing our divides, mitigating violence, and bringing us back together to one another. So on YouTube, lots of videos on YouTube, lots of videos on my website. So please visit me. You can contact me and ask me any question you want. I'm available. And I just really appreciate being on your show. I think that you're doing a magnificent service, because we just really need to hear each other. We need to have these forums. And I think podcasts are actually a fabulous forum for just bringing many, many voices to the stage without, it has to be one thing or another. And it sounds like you're open to many points of view. And I think that's a great contribution today, that we just really need to hear many points of view and then decide for ourselves what's really functional.
Oh, exactly. Instead of just me, and well, listeners already know my story, how I shifted from one political party to another, as realizing, you know what, y'all more of the problem, not the solution. I'm gonna operate my own way, and I've been a happy registered independent ever since.
Hmm.
Because I think both of them are the problem, but I'm not gonna bash them because Phyllis has influenced me to be in a more calm mood, instead of just
Right.
bashing both sides of the aisle or even sometimes the center. So all that she has mentioned, I'm gonna put in the links to all her social media accounts, and most importantly the website she had. For the time being, if you can't wait, Cherie has two books out that have been released. Okay, I'm just gonna just read the titles: A Light into the Darkness and Into the Fire. Okay, so they're already out. You don't need to wait for those two. Just in case you're still a little anxious, you want to consume some content right away. I know it's instant gratification culture, especially for people around my age group. Look, you got something. You can read two books while you're waiting for that third one. So there you have it, and just like shit, you have a free um mini course, and I'm sure it's gonna be more to come, because I'm
There will
sure
be more to come.
that I am 1,000%. If I was a betting man, I would have bet money on that. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's free.
Oh, thank you.
She has to offer.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
mean, with over 3 decades, I'm sure that you have more to offer than just that. I'll be ashamed if that was just the end, but I know that's not the case. I'm
No, no,
so, and then yeah, you contact her and you do speaking engagements as well. I
I
think there's
do. I do. I'm available for speaking engagements, certainly on podcasts and any other digital is, of course, easier today. But yeah, for sure. I'm just really passionate about being a contribution to our survival, really is what I would say, and our thrival. Our thriving as a human race, our thriving as families and individuals, and not just white knuckling it through.
absolutely. And of course, the work you're doing is, I mean, the timing could not get any better because that, I mean, if you would have, if this would have happened in the 90s, well, forget it, I would not be able to talk properly. But if this would have happened earlier, I think this would have sounded a little crazy, but sadly, the climate that we in, this is just needed more than ever. I wish we had the wait to reach this point,
Yeah.
but hey, you know, you're here and you're definitely the solution. And I want to promote more solutions than just talking points from either the left, the right, the center, and all the other interesting political groups.
Well,
No,
thank you.
no,
Thank
no, not a problem. You definitely so people just reach out to her. She has a lot of experience, and I'm not gonna make a promise, but for all I'm gonna say is I'm gonna definitely bring more women and minorities into this show because I'm trying to represent as many perspectives as possible. I really want to do that. I'm 1,000% serious about that. I don't have to agree. Forget it. It was about just me. Forget it. It would have been a totally different show, and you will definitely see the more jokey, crazy side. But that's not my goal here. We gotta be grown. We gotta be responsible at some point. So,
you.
alrighty then. So, like, comment, share, subscribe. This is a whole normal YouTube. I'm going to call myself a Rumbler at this point. And if you listen to this through Apple, Spotify, give a review. If I'm not getting a 5 star, especially for Apple Podcasts, just leave some feedback about why I'm not getting 5 star review. Just saying, the audio wasn't as well. Does content relate to me somehow, or whatever that you see that I could improve in. If I'm not getting a 5 star, getting a 5 star, then I don't really need the comment. I think I achieved on what I achieved my goal right there. Alrighty then. So from wherever you're listening to this podcast, I know it's not just Americans. Good chunk of India, a little bit of Brazil, Mexico. You listen to this as well. So whenever you're listening to this, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.